We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by FanDuel. Locks of the Week, Wildcard Edition, position by position. These are the players that we have to have exposure to in both the Saturday and Sunday only slates on FanDuel, bringing it all together at the end as we try and build the optimal DFS lineup for each one of these slates. Let's jump right into it. Quarterback locks of the week. We're going to start with the Saturday slate. Josh Allen is 8,800 versus the Patriots, and we have Joe Burrow 7,800 versus the Raiders. So let's start with both of those guys, but I think that's got to be the starting point for most people this week, I would imagine, at quarterback for the Saturday slate, right?
Yeah, because I think you're looking at it. I know the line keeps dropping because of the weather, and it's in the teens right now for temperature. And then, of course, if precipitation happens, then you're worried about that game that they lost. The good thing is that what we just saw from Josh Allen in a weather type game is that he still ran for 2 touchdowns. So you still have that. Obviously, the passing day wasn't great, so that's where I would honestly come off of him if there is precipitation. The temperature itself doesn't scare me too much, and I'm actually hoping that it pushes some people away because of this line and because of the weather concern. But you know what Josh Allen can do, and if you're looking at Saturday too, is just where are you really getting that great of a savings unless you go with Joe Burrow? And I know that the secondary for the Raiders has been talked about a lot this year, but if you also look at it from the second half of the season, and then just in comparison to some of the teams that they were playing well against secondary-wise, it's a pretty stark contrast to the level of quarterbacks they were playing. So I know some people will probably try to get Derek Carr on that game on the flip side, or maybe even try to drop down to Joe or Mac Jones to save a ton of money, but not against I'm not doing it against the Bills defense. I think I saw somebody tweeted out that they've given it like 2 or 3 more total completions than to completions like of 20+ yards or something ridiculous like that over the past couple of weeks. It's a ridiculous number. I forget what it was. But yeah, the top 2 in play for me are Allen and Burrow.
Yeah, the Sims agree with you. Specifically, that first game does kind of dominate the Sims, but from a quarterback perspective, looks like Josh Allen, looks like Joe Burrow leading the way on the slate. Obviously, just a 2-game slate, so not a ton of options, but definitely think that those two separate a little bit. I think there's an argument maybe in tournaments for Derek Carr, but we'll get to that with TJ later in the week. So let's talk about the Sunday slate for a second. And at the quarterback position, I think it kind of is Dak Prescott at 8K, the only game that's indoors. Like there's a lot of stuff to like here, especially between just the Cowboys and 49ers game in general. I think has a chance to go over the total. So I'm curious if you think that, I guess, most of the ownership, I think, though, Jake, might go to Tom Brady in game number 1 and Patrick Mahomes in game number 3. But I'm kind of with you on this Dak stuff. I'm warming up to it, definitely.
And that's kind of why I'm hoping that the recency good bias of Dak Prescott's 2 blow-up games, including one of them just only in the first half, that doesn't push too many people towards Dak. And the other reason is because I see a lot of people picking the 49ers as like the upset of the week. Like of all the games that are going to happen, a lot of people seem to be like, if you had a chalk upset pick, that would be what it is, and just as the pick side of things. So I'm hoping that some people are going to be off Dak for that. And as you mentioned, you get that strategy of, okay, do I want the big gun in the first game or the last game to have that hammer? And you have Brady and Mahomes, those options. So yeah, I'm with Dak. I know a lot of times people try to avoid the middle game and to go too heavy in it, but just using Dak, this again, you mentioned 8K, so you're getting minimum 400 savings because that's Brady, then 700 from Mahomes, which I think could be the most popular play. And I mean, we know what Dak can do. And I think that me personally, this is on a sidebar, this isn't even from the DFS perspective. The other reason I'm behind it, and this might be, hey, I could be completely wrong, I just think the Cowboys are going to walk away with this game unless the wrong Cowboys team shows up. And I know that's always, whatever. It's football. But the right Cowboys team shows up. I mean, this could be a double-digit win. And if it's a double-digit win, you're going to want Dak to have been your quarterback.
Yeah, and if you want a little bit more info on this game specifically, we went in detail with Rich Rebar, so check out the Stacks video for that one. But yeah, again, I guess 2 for 2, Jay, because the top optimal quarterback, if looking at the Sims on the Sunday slate, is Dak Prescott by a significant margin, even though we're going to see Mahomes and Brady be higher owned, I believe, than Dak. So I'm totally on board with that. Let's talk about the running back position now, and we'll transition back to the Saturday slate for a second. We have Joe Mixon, 8,500 versus the Raiders, and we have Ramondre Stevenson at 5,200 at Buffalo. So the Saturday slate, again, just 2 games. Joe Mixon shapes up as like one of the best plays on the entire slate. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think Joe Mixon, I think a lot of people will be on Singletary, and deservedly so, even going against the Patriots in that game. And what his workload at 6,900, Honestly, I like Singletary more than Stevenson. We'll get to that in a second. But Joe Mixon, again, you just run against the Raiders. The Raiders defense just hasn't been that great against good teams in general. But the entire season, they've been very vulnerable to the run. That's something that you and I have talked about this entire year, is attacking the Raiders in the running back department. So Joe Mixon has that appeal. The only way where I would say you go away from this, but this is probably something you talk more about with TJ, is that if you do, similar to the Thanksgiving game you and I talked about, is like, if you fade Joe Mixon and he has just 80 yards without a touchdown, you're going to be having a leg up on everybody. So if you want to go that direction, but that's what you would have to have happen, because it is a smaller slate, only 2 games on Saturday. Like, Joe Mixon really has to have a pretty poor game to avoid him, but I just don't see that happening against the Raiders. So that's why I'm on Mixon. I like Singletary a lot, but I wanted to throw out what would be my low end option, because we're not going to be able to slam our team together with $7,000 to $8,000 options down the line.
Sure.
If you're looking at this, so the scenario situation, go back to when we were talking about Josh Allen. What happened? Like the good game for the Bills, where they won by, I think it was like 30 something to 21, 38 or something like that to 21, or 33 to 21 or something. Anyway, the Patriots, if Stevenson needs to be involved in the passing game, can be. And then if it is the game where they won in the snow and the weather goes bad, they're going to run so much that Stevenson's going to be in play no matter what the health is of Damian Harris. And that's why I think he's intriguing at 5,200 when you go down this list, because outside of him, if you're really trying to get deep savings on here, anybody in the 5 to low K range under that, I don't see anybody getting significant work. Like, Bolden would need Stevenson or Harris to miss the game, unless you think that's going to be a 40-0 blowout and he gets fourth quarter work. And then Rashard gets, what is he going to get, 4 catches? Right. So I just don't see anybody else getting enough involvement like Stevenson could.
Yeah, just looking at the Sims, Joe Mixon leads the way by a pretty significant margin. I'm with you, Singletary, if you didn't want to pay all the way up or have some builds where you play Singletary and Mixon, probably feels like the optimal route, but I do like the Stevenson call quite a bit. Let's talk about Sunday quickly, because this running back, we're still waiting on some news. Obviously, if CEH is confirmed out, Darrell Williams, instantly becomes one of the best plays on this entire slate at just 6,600. But let's talk about playoff Lenny for a second, 7,300. You don't have to talk me into this one, but I'm curious your thoughts on him being, he's probably the top running back play on the slate if we get CEH in or limited CEH, whatever it may be, right? Leonard Fournette seems like an absolute smash.
Yeah, especially the 7,300. Obviously, we'll see some time too to make sure that he sounds like he's 100%. Hopefully he is. That's the risk, obviously. But the good news is that it sounds like Ronald Jones is doubtful at this point. And to tie into the CEH thing is, I like Darrell Williams even before that. I think what Darrell Williams has been doing, and this offense has been clicking, that even if CEH is coming back, I think Darrell Williams is the lead at this point. And just from the performance. Now, does that chip into his touches? Obviously, CEH is not going to come back and not see anything. But I like Darrell Williams anyway. And I have a feeling that lineup build, if you're playing on Sunday, I don't dislike Najee Harris, but that game could go sideways really fast for Pittsburgh. I don't dislike Ezekiel Elliott, especially if I do think that the Cowboys are going to win by double digits, potentially. I think they win, but the potential part being the double digits. It's just some of these are like, 8,000, 7,700. Why not just take Fournette? Elijah Mitchell. Well, if that game also, again, goes sideways and Deebo Samuel keeps getting involved, 7,400. So it's just, the price at 7,300 is just hard to get away from. I don't want to touch the Philadelphia backfield, because with Miles Sanders back, it's all of them. And who the hell knows? I'm sure one of them will score a touchdown, but good guess on picking who. That's more of a TJ call. Yeah,
and then the injury, from like Sanders in general, like, is he even going to be used in pass blocking situations? Is going to be used at all, like as a pass catcher? Like, who knows, right? Like, that seems like a little bit scary for me. And he is nowhere near the Sims right now. The only guy from Philly that's in the Sims, really even in the top 15, is Dallas Goedert, and that's on the slate that's just absolutely loaded at tight end, which we can get to shortly. But before we move on to wide receiver, I know if you guys have been with us all year, I'd really appreciate it if you could help out the show. RateThisPodcast.com/The Joe Holka Show. There is Spotify reviews now, so I'd really appreciate that. Helps grow the show, but ultimately helps us grow our community overall also. So wide receiver lock of the week on the Saturday slate, Gabe Davis versus the Patriots. He is extremely, extremely cheap, Jake. So that's got to be like part of the thought process here, right?
That's part of it. I've mentioned before too, is that he's already ahead of Emmanuel Sanders. I know Emmanuel Sanders doesn't have the injury designation, so that downgrades him a little bit, but not enough to the point where I actually hope that makes people come off of him, because the bad weather game I was talking about where Josh Allen ran for 2 touchdowns, that didn't hit for Davis, but the passing game did it. And then the very last week, next week after that, Davis was what I almost texted you. Like he had 2 touchdowns, a big play. Like
He still has a
just,
role in the red zone, regardless of like Sanders being
right,
in,
but there
right?
was just they just missed like legitimately like 3 plays between Allen and him. He like just missed where everybody would be like, "Oh, this is a great call." Yeah, I'm all over. Like Davis would probably be very chalky. So I actually like the fact that he just missed on a couple opportunities there. So if you're going Allen, I'm going right back to it. I told you, like the Allen's Diggs, Gabe Davis stack I hit last week, and they didn't hit with the Davis part, but it hit enough that it still did really well for me. I'm going right back to it against New England. And the biggest thing, too, is if J.C. Jackson does what he did last time, I'm actually off Diggs because J.C. Jackson has shadowed a little bit towards the end of the year, and he did spend a decent amount of time on Diggs. I think he almost was on him most of the game that time.
Diggs is a tough price too, right? Because you're making that decision between like kind of like mixing at that point, right? Like if you really like have to, if you're going to go stars and scrubs, it's not as easy to do if you're going to be putting Diggs in those. And then Gabriel Davis is 5,200. I was like skimming, trying to find his. I had to scroll all the way down to find him in his salary, 5,200 for Gabe Davis. So I mean, on that, the Singletary stuff is interesting because if you're playing Josh Allen, Singletary is like the one guy in this offense that just doesn't really positively correlate to any of those weapons, right? So I actually think that Singletary as a one-off makes a lot more sense if you're trying to build optimally. But let's save some time for these wide receivers on Sunday, Jay, because there's a lot more of them to talk about. I think obviously the Dallas guys, we have CeeDee Lamb 7,300, we have Cedric Wilson, who's way too cheap at 6K against the 49ers, and then on the other side of this game, Deebo Samuel 8,700, probably going to be one of the more popular plays on the entire slate. I haven't played enough Deebo Samuel this year, that's for sure. But this mini stack, even if you aren't going Dak, like these passing options in game number 2, I think on Sunday makes a lot of sense. So start wherever you want. I like the Dallas guys a lot, though. We're definitely on the same page there.
Yeah, you have to like the Dallas guys a lot. And honestly, the inconsistency of Mari Cooper, we'd be intrigued by Michael Gallup in general, but Cedric Wilson, the 2 touchdowns, although I think that's going to make him chalky because, again, recency bias and people are going to see that have happened. But he'd be in play anyway. Like, just swap out the name. If you're going to put the third wide receiver at 6,000, that person could always be involved, whether it was Gallup before this Wilson now. Hell, if it was not Wilson, it was Noah Brown or somebody like that, we'd be intrigued. So that's what it comes down to. If I'm going Dak, I'm going CeeDee Lamb. He's the lock of the one. I could see people wanting to risk that Cooper has the big games, but his big games haven't even been that big from Cooper's past years. So, yeah, I would actually go on the ends. I would go with the clear number 1 and Lamb, and I would go with Wilson. And then, yeah, absolutely. If there's any way you can build your lineup and come back with Deebo Samuel, 100%. I know the touches have been a little bit more consistent down the stretch, but if you're going to give me the opportunity to have a rushing touchdown, he almost went for the trifecta. He had a rushing and a passing without the receiving. He almost got the receiving too. It's insane, honestly. Like at this point, 8,700 is actually underpriced for what Deebo Samuel is doing. So outside of that, I mean, I thought about Deontay Johnson because I always think about Deontay Johnson, so you know that. But those are the main ones I'd be looking at this weekend.
Yeah, the top optimal rate players on the Sunday slate, Leonard Fournette, Deebo Samuel, significantly higher than the rest of the field. Deebo is like one of those ones, too, where it's like we haven't really seen, it's crazy to think about, but like his true ceiling, like hitting all of these things at once, like getting a bunch of targets, like if he throws the ball, whatever, but a bunch of targets, a bunch of rush attempts, like it very rarely happens in the same game. So that ceiling is just so incredibly high for him. He's more expensive than Tyreek Hill, but I think for good reason at this point. But let's keep this thing moving at the tight end position on the Saturday slate. If we did want to pay down to someone like CJ Uzoma at 5,200 against the Raiders, I think that one makes a ton of sense on a slate where there's not a ton of like really appealing value. So talk about CJ Uzoma a little bit.
Yeah, that's really all it is. It's just paying down. If you're not going to go Dawson Knox, which the Patriots have been pretty dang good against tight ends the entire year. Not that Knox can't hit against them, but at 6,000, you kind of almost put in the conversation, well, Waller looked pretty good in his first game back, so why not just get to Waller at 63? But on the flip side of that game, it just comes down to savings. Especially in a small slate, if I can find a way to get savings, and I mean, he's not the min because you have Jonnu and Foster Moreau, but nobody's playing the second tight end on the team, so he's basically the min tight end. And if I think the Bengals are going to do what the Bengals do and put up a hell of a lot of points, we've seen Uzoma, however we say his last name. I don't even know at this point because everybody says it differently.
Yeah.
But it comes down to the fact we've seen him score 2 touchdowns before. You're just hoping he scores a touchdown. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and the Sunday slate is really interesting at tight end because we have George Kittle, we have Travis Kelce, we have Rob Gronkowski, and then we have a really cheap Dallas Goedert, right? So, like, yeah, you mentioned Deontay Johnson and the Steelers, like Pat Freiermuth. Like, if you're just grabbing a touchdown at tight end, like that might be enough, right? So he's your lock of the week on the Sunday slate, 5,400 at KC.
Yeah, Gronkowski's obvious.
Yeah.
Kelce, obvious. I mean, Kelsey's only $100 more than him at this point, which is crazy to see. Kittle's been not just Trey Lance, but a little bit more inconsistent, especially with Debo and Ayuk doing their thing and Elijah Mitchell back and his opportunity. So, yeah, Freiermuth, people know I love Air Freiermuth, and it just comes down to his involvement in the pass game. I know Gentry's starting to get a little bit more involved, but at the same time, Freiermuth touchdown at 5,400, very similar to Uzama, but a lot more consistent use on top of it when healthy. And it was just that concussion that knocked him out for a little bit of time. So yeah, if you're not going for one of the, I guess you would say big three. I mean, I don't dislike Schultz either at 62, but $800 savings between Schultz and Freiermuth. I'm probably just going to go Freiermuth also because Blake Jarwin is back, and it's just again Schultz usage is a little bit more inconsistent than Freiermuth is.
All right, before we build a lineup for each of these slates, going to bug you guys one last time to subscribe to the second YouTube channel. I've noticed a lot of you guys have not hit the notification bell over there, so even if you've already subbed, definitely make sure you hit that bell so you don't miss anything along the way. Going to do a bunch of stuff throughout the playoffs over on that channel. So FanDuel.com/Holka. We are going to build a lineup for each of these slates. There's a $5 rake-free tournament for each of them. Jake will have some teams in both. So let's start on Saturday, and we can move a little bit quicker. Obviously, there's not as many decisions to be made here. So Saturday slate, what do you want to do at quarterback, Jake?
Joe Burrow. Let's go that route.
Let's do it. So I think we're fine playing Mixon with Burrow, though, correct?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, you know what? Let's see if we have to go. I'm going to immediately
leave it open for now.
Let's come back to that. We'll come back to see where we leave it. So go with Mixon. And then we'll go with the wide receiver, get T. Higgins now that he's healthy.
Yeah, and T's kind of cheap at 6,900, I feel like, too, versus someone like Renfro in that range.
Bananas at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So Higgins, Davis, put those two in.
Okay.
I'm going to pay up for the Bills defense.
I was just going to say, let's get a defense in that other game.
Yeah, second half of the season, the Mac Jones has been pretty poor. We were praising how efficient and non-turnover prone he had been, and he's kind of fallen off in the second half of the season. So I like that.
We're still fine on salary at this point, 6,700. So yeah, I think we're doing good so far.
Put a Zama in there to get the cheap tight end, and then let's go and see if we can fill out the Josh Allen.
Okay, so we got Gabe Davis in here. Oh, so do we have Burrow or Josh Allen in here?
We were going to come back to that.
Okay,
we're gonna have,
cool.
Yeah, so let's put Josh Allen in.
Okay, so right now we got Allen, Gabe Davis, Buffalo defense in that game. In the other game, we got Mixon, T. Higgins, Uzoma so far.
Okay, so
6,900 the rest of the way.
Let's bring Higgins back with Renfro.
Okay, cool. We got Renfro in there. I think that makes sense, especially if Uzoma is going to be at tight end. Like, we don't probably need to force in Waller onto this team. So we got Renfro, 6,800 the rest of the way for a running back and a flex.
What does Stevenson get us?
Stevenson at 5,200 gets us Jamar Chase at 82, Stephon Diggs at 8K. So
but Higgins, Uzama, and Chase with no Burrow doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense.
That's true, but it's still like a mini stack, right? It's a 2-game slate. I think you're probably adding Diggs to this one, though, right? That gives you a little bit more flexibility. You have 400 left on the table if you wanted to make some moves.
I kind of want to stay off Diggs, though, so that's the problem.
Okay, so let's leave Diggs out. What would you want to upgrade?
So let's go back to Burrow.
Okay.
Let's put in Chase at flex just to see what that takes. So Stevenson at running back out, and that gives us 6,400, which means we can't get the Singletary. Does nothing. So if we put Stevenson in at tight end, what does that let us do? I'm doing this at the same time as you, obviously.
Stevenson in at running back.
Put Darren Waller in.
Oh, fifth, perfect. That's great. Good stuff. I love how that works out. So let's move right into the Sunday slate, Jake. I'm going to get you out of here as quick as I can. And the Sunday slate,
running backs. I don't know. That was what I was going. I started to say that and then stopped and went on to another point. I want to come back to running backs on Sunday if I'm building my teams for everybody. So put in the Debo, put in CeeDee Lamb and Cedric Wilson, and then put in Dak.
I was just going to say, I might as well do the Dak double with this one. So that's kind of the starting point, which I don't hate. So defense probably in the other game makes sense, or at least one of the other games, right? So we got KC all the way at the top. We got Tampa Bay, significantly cheaper if you did want to go that route. Those are probably the two top options.
Tampa Bay.
Okay. So Tampa Bay at 4,200. Still 64 the rest of the way, but we're still going to have to find some sort of salary relief here probably.
Yeah, so if we put in Darrell Williams, that gives us a little bit, but not enough yet.
What's the deal with CEH? Like, when do you think we're going to know about that? I guess you said it doesn't really matter to you, right? Even if he does play.
Nah, I'd say Friday.
Okay, so 6,400 the rest of the way for a running back, tight end, and flex.
Put Freiermuth in.
Okay.
And
6,900 now.
And then if we put in for net, what does that leave us?
6,500 in the flex. That gets us like we could double tight end this one. I don't hate that actually. So I know we're going to expand on this point because this is on TJ's agenda today in the GPP show. So make sure you guys check out that video. But maybe this is a slate where it is so loaded at tight end that instead of just picking one, you're not really getting a lot of leverage either way. Maybe it's just a roster construction move here where you try and play 2 tight ends. Like, what do you think about that? And like adding Kittle.
Yeah. I think it could be interesting because at the same time, especially for this lineup, I mean, you're bringing it back twice now with Debo and Kittle.